This is the Real Estate Investing 365 podcast, your go-to source for real estate investing strategies so you can start living the life you want and get where you want to go. With your host, Justin Hanna.
Yes.
Hey, welcome back, everybody. It's Real Estate Investing 365. Today, I have Bryce Stewart on here. He is from Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. He was a school teacher, retired with a bunch of money from real estate, bought a bunch of units, and now he's here talking to us. So what's up, Bryce? Thanks for being here.
Hey, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
And you're right. That is kind of the beginnings of my story, but it's more complicated than that.
Yeah, I didn't think it was that easy. Just all of a sudden, hey, by the way, I'm just going to buy some real estate today and retire tomorrow. So why don't we jump into that a little bit, just into your background, and then later we'll kind of dive into where you're at now and everything.
Sure.
So you're from Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. You were a school teacher. Kind of just give us a little history on you and like your pre-real estate days and how you moved into real estate.
Sure. I should start from childhood. I won't spend too long there, but I grew up as the son of a Presbyterian minister.
Okay.
And my mother was a stay-at-home wife. So we did not, I don't know if your listeners know anything about pastors or ministers, but they don't tend to make a lot of money.
Mm-hmm.
I'm one of 4 children. And so we were happy. I mean, in retrospect, we probably had a solidly middle-class existence. But I had a middle-class existence for the most part in places where most of my peers had a more upper-class existence.
Okay.
So I spent the first part of my childhood in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and the second part in Princeton, New Jersey. And both environments were fairly affluent. So I always felt like I was the poor kid. Mm-hmm. In a lot of ways. So I think that has played into my mentality. There's no doubt. I don't think I've totally deconstructed it, even in adulthood. But there was always my parents were responsible with money, but it's hard to have high compensation career goals when you're a pastor because that's sort of unspiritual, you know?
Yeah.
So, it was just a different focus. I won't say good or bad. It's just my parents didn't opt for the route of pursuing as much money as they could.
And as a kid, you probably didn't know the difference anyway, so that's totally fine. Yeah.
Well, like I said, I saw the contrast, especially towards high school, between myself and my peers. Mm-hmm. And sometimes it felt like, why does everybody else get nice stuff, but I can't have it?
Okay.
So, just being honest, full disclosure, that's some of my background. Now, I went to college, mm-hmm. and I got a degree in elementary education, which in the state of Pennsylvania meant I was certified to teach kindergarten through 6th grade. And I kind of had resigned myself to, I'm going to say, the same path, as in not pursuing high compensation as my career goal. It's hard to do that as an elementary school teacher.
Yeah.
So, there's some things that play into that. For your listeners, I bet there's probably a lesson in there. In my, let's say, mid-20s, late 20s, when I was starting to look at maybe doing real estate, I had this idea that the high income train had already left the for me, or that ship had sailed. It's like, if I had wanted to make a lot of money, I should have gotten a degree in finance or pre-med or law or something like that. And the lie I was telling myself was, there's no, I already missed it. My 19-year-old self that picked my college major was picking my financial trajectory for the rest of my life. Mm-hmm. And that has proven to be, for me at least, not true. So I just want to point that out to your listeners too. I bet there's some of them they're feeding themselves that same narrative, that either the mistakes that they made in the past or maybe the job that they're in right now, or their career trajectory, that is definitive for the rest of their life. And I'm saying, in my experience, it doesn't have to be that way. There's a different way to approach it.
Yeah, and I wonder if that, I do think that kind of goes back through our whole, schooling days. Is that as you're going through school, not that it's good, bad, or indifferent, but as you're going through school, everybody talks about, get good grades, and you need to go to college, and then you go to college so you can get a good job. And then, so you kind of think that if you go to college for a specific job, that's the job that you're gonna have to do. And if you make the wrong choice when you're young, you're like, oh shoot, well now I'm stuck in this career field. But there's a whole world of opportunity out there, and there's millions of people that do jobs and make careers, make a lot of money and stuff that you don't do, So yeah, no, I definitely hear what you're saying. And I've had that kind of thought before. And luckily I've switched my mindset on that. So that's awesome.
And the other narrative that people tell themselves, I think, or that I told myself, was that rich people are way smarter than I am.
Yeah.
That we froze a little bit there. My internet connection is on. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Yeah, you're doing good.
The other lie is that rich people are way smarter than you are.
Mm-hmm.
That when you're stuck, let's say, in the grind of a middle-class existence, you convince yourself that there's some special talent or ability or secret knowledge that wealthy people have, that you just are not a part of that. And I want it for your listeners. I bet there's some of that too, that they think I'm not smart enough to do that, or I don't have the connections, or I don't have the, whatever, the pedigree to do it. And that's not true either. At this point, I've been exposed to a lot of very wealthy people. And my number one takeaway after spending time with them is they're not that smart.
Yeah, no, that's true.
Now, they aren't, most of them are not idiots.
Yeah, no, most of them are not idiots.
I mean, you can't be an idiot. Right. But it's just that they have taken actions and steps that have gotten them to where they are. And the sum total of those cumulative steps, none of them is usually rocket science. It's just an accumulation of good risks, maybe, or solid choices, or some delayed gratification, and then the compound effect of those things. So for me, that was a big eye opener too. Was coming away being like, I'm way smarter than that guy, and he's a deca millionaire.
Yeah.
So because you fool yourself into thinking I can only be successful after I get to this genius level of business development. I should probably get my MBA. I should probably be tutored by Warren Buffett, and then I'll think about investing in real estate.
Right.
Because then I'll deserve it,
Right. Or
that's not true.
Yeah. Or we're all waiting, or a lot of people seems to be waiting till they hear the right piece of advice, or they read that one book that's going to give them the magic sauce to make it to the next level or whatever. But I don't know if it's that. It's more just like, maybe the average person, like, that becomes successful, it's that they really are just like so free flowing in life that they're kind of like, let me just take this chance. I don't really care. And then some people get so analytical about it that they're worried about, well, if I make this chance, I'm going to ruin everything and I'm going to go back to nothing. But that's not the case. It's just, you got to take the risks and educate yourself.
I mean, I'll be honest with you, there's plenty of wealthy people I know who were too dumb to properly calculate the risks of what they were doing.
Yeah.
And so they went ahead and did it. And the more, let's say, intellectually minded people would have talked themselves out of it, or would have been too afraid. That's why a lot of times, attorneys, insurance agents, financial advisors, people who have an MBA degree, they're all very well versed in risk.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of times they become myopic and they focus on the risk, and it means that they tend to not be entrepreneurial. Of course, there's exceptions, but
yeah.
When you have a really thorough education on risk, the human psyche begins to fool you into lack of action.
Yeah, no, I agree. That's like a lot of those, people say, I was a C student and now I hire the A students or whatever, that old saying is,
The
I
C,
think that,
the C student skipped reading the chapter on risk.
yeah. So that's cool. So how did you even get the idea of real estate?
Well, it was progressive for me, which is good because I'm analytical by nature. I minored in philosophy in college while majoring in elementary education. And so my tendency, and by the way, my family, I love my parents. They were great. Like I said, they were responsible with money, but they were the kind of people who wanted to understand all of the risks in everything. And so a lot of times it meant, let's say that they want, before they took step one, they wanted to be guaranteed of what step 5 would be.
Yeah.
And of course, if that's your MO, you never end up taking step 1 because you really don't know what step 5 is until you've taken steps 1 through 4. So I'm sorry, we're getting a freezing connection here. Let me try to make sure that am I good?
I think you're good. Yeah, I see you. You look good. Looking pretty as always.
That's great. So, that was instilled in me too, is this idea that like, I had my real life. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And then wealthy was like, to me, the only path to wealth in my understanding was the instant path to wealth. So like wealthy people were either they invent something crazy like the chip clip, or I don't know, a slap bracelet.
Yeah.
and then they rocket towards financial success, or they hit the lottery. But it instilled in my mind was this idea that there's a huge element of luck involved in getting wealthy, and I had to really overcome that because if your idea is that wealth is a product of luck, then that excuses you from ever taking action. And you don't look to other people for direction. Am I freezing again?
No,
I'm sorry about that.
I see you good. You're doing good on my end.
That's great. So I was saying, if wealth is about luck, then you excuse yourself from taking action.
Mm-hmm.
Because the ball's in somebody else's court, whether it's God, Allah, fate, the universe. If that entity chooses to give you money, then you'll be the happy recipient of it. And if they don't, it's useless to attempt anyhow.
Yeah,
So,
no, that's good. That's a good insight to that.
yeah.
I feel like a lot of people use those things as excuses these days. You know what I mean? And one benefit we have is today, especially more than even when you got started or just in 2009 when I got started, I feel like is that there's so much social media out there, whether it's like Instagram, Facebook, or podcast, or like the information is super accessible to where you can like hear stories of people like yourself that have come, like average Joes that have come to financial success through different ways. Whereas before it might've been just like a folklore or whatever, like, oh yeah, supposedly they did, but you don't really know. But now you can really see like, hey, I got Bryce right here. He did it, so that's definitely
Yeah. And it's not guaranteed, but it's at least possible.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, so I'll give you my first like exposure to it. Okay.
Yeah. Yep.
When I finished college, I came back and I did not have a teaching job already secured. So I came back to, I graduated high school in Westchester, Pennsylvania, which is just outside of Philadelphia. And when I came back, I didn't have a job lined up. So I was in my parents' house, living in my high school bedroom. And I was working, I took a job helping to renovate for like an hourly pay, helping to renovate this attorney's office in downtown Westchester. And the guy ran a title insurance company, which is like real estate settlement and title insurance. And eventually he hired me, he and his partners hired me to start doing sales for title insurance. which was an awful sales job because it was just that I was trying to expand our market to realtors, mortgage brokers, bankers, and that kind of thing. Of course, if you've been in real estate for any length of time, you know that the buyer is the one who chooses title insurance, and they're only really can be like influenced by the mortgage broker or whatever. So
Yeah.
it was a hard sales position because it was weird.
Uh-huh.
But the great takeaway from it was I was 23 years old, living in my parents' bedroom, or my parents' house, not my parents' bedroom, in my bedroom. That would have been even weirder.
Yeah.
And I was working with another 23-year-old who was in the same job that I was. He was doing sales as well.
Mm-hmm.
And I asked him where he lived, and he said that he and his college roommate had bought a 4-unit apartment building, and that each unit was 2 bedrooms, and that they lived roomed together in one of the units and rented the other 3 out. And that did not make any sense to me when he explained it to me, because my childhood was spent in suburbia. So I didn't, we never lived in an apartment. Even in college, I went to a college where there was 4-year dormitory housing. And so I never even rented an apartment when I was in college.
Mm-hmm.
And the only apartments I had ever even conceptualized was Joey and Chandler's apartment on Friends.
Oh, yeah.
And Jerry Seinfeld's apartment on Seinfeld. So the idea that an individual person could own an apartment was nonsense to me. It didn't make any sense to me that a person could own an apartment.
Mm-hmm.
Only large corporations own apartments. So this guy says that he owns this apartment building. I'm like, what do you mean you own it? Like you own it?
Yeah,
we own it. I'm like, how did you afford that? Isn't the mortgage really high? And he told me it's not low, but to be honest with you, we pay the mortgage with the rents that we get from the other 3 units. And I was like, well, what about, aren't there real estate taxes or insurance, that kind of thing? He's like, yeah, we pay that with the rent from the other 3 units.
Yeah.
I'm like, well, wait, hold on. Isn't there a really high electric bill and a water bill and heating bill and all that stuff? And he's like, well, to be honest with you, each of the units is individually metered, but we actually pay our utilities with the rent that we get from the other 3 units.
Yeah.
I was like, wait, hold on. I'm paying my parents $300 a month to live in my high school bedroom, and you guys are freaking living for free in an apartment on your own? And the guy's like, yeah, actually it also puts $100 a month in each of our pockets. And I was gobsmacked.
Yeah.
Because in all of my education, I did fairly well in school. I had 2 college educated parents. Nobody had ever told me that you could make money from something besides your job.
Yeah.
That was news. And I was angry that no one had ever laid that out for me.
Uh-huh.
So that was the first seed of possibility that was planted in my mind was now maybe that part is luck. Okay. Maybe that was fateful or the universe smiling on me or whatever, but that didn't achieve the success for me. That just planted the idea in my head. This is something somebody can do. And this is something that someone I know has done. And so I was, I cornered him in the lunchroom and I was like, you need to tell me who told you to do that and how you did it. And he gave me the book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And I read it in a day and a half.
Yeah.
And just devoured it. It was new. That was completely new information for me. The idea that you could build passive income and that it could eventually be your dominant way of making money. That was not on my radar at all. I look back and I'm like, I was smart. How was that not on my radar at all? I should have known better than that, but I just didn't. I thought rich people have high paying jobs and poor people have low paying or no jobs. And that was my economic universe.
Well, that's the case with so many people that have never done real estate or don't know anybody. I didn't really know too many people or anybody that did real estate investing. I knew people in real estate business, but if you don't know, right? A baby comes into this world, they don't know anything. They don't know to be scared of, a dog or scared of something, right? They just like learn it over time. And same with us. If we're
Right.
never exposed to this type of thing, well,
Yeah.
how are we supposed to know, So
I'm going to give us a different room. Keep talking.
yeah. So I definitely understand what you're saying. And so you go from there. What year was this? Do you remember?
When I encountered that kid,
Yeah.
2003. I had just graduated college.
Okay.
And was back home in 2003.
So in 2003, and then so how much farther after that? You weren't married yet or anything, but you got to at least planted the idea that real estate was a possibility. And then
Correct.
I assume after that you went ahead and you got a teaching job, and then you got into
Correct,
that.
yeah.
Oh.
So my wife and I got married, and we moved to Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, which is where she's from. And I got a teaching job. And we bought in 2006, we had an opportunity through a connection to buy a luxury one-bedroom condominium in a retrofitted steel foundry in Bethlehem.
Okay.
So a developer had bought this foundry and made 172 luxury condominiums. And in 2006, they were selling for probably 150. And because of the inn that we had, we got an early contract for like 140 maybe.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, this is great, instant equity.
Yeah.
Okay. But, and I thought maybe we won't stay here, but I at least wanted to stay at least 2 years so that we could sell and not have to pay capital gains on any equity gain from our primary residence.
Right.
Makes sense?
Yeah.
So then 2 years later, it was 2008, and the market was in the tank, and equivalent units to ours were selling for $85,000.
Oh.
So, and they were exact comps.
Yeah.
So we were officially underwater by more money than I could ever hope to make up, by saving away and paying it down. And we found out that we were pregnant.
Oh man.
So, and then for your listeners, again, I don't know how astute or how far into real estate they are, but if you're a novice, this was a good lesson for me. We didn't add up the cost of owning that condo on a month-to-month basis until we were pregnant and looking at moving out. So, and I didn't calculate how much we could expect to rent the place out for. And so when we started that investigation, what can we get in rent?
Mm-hmm.
Our all-in costs every month were $1,400 per month, and the highest we could expect to rent it for was $1,100 a month. So we were looking at, even with a tenant in the place, a $300 per month loss at the exact time that when we were having a baby, and that my wife's hours were going to be reduced. Probably at work.
Yeah, because you had double income. So
yeah,
and then she gets pregnant. So you're like, well, shoot, now what are we gonna do?
Exactly right. And it was really bad. I mean, we couldn't sell. I couldn't. There's no way I could throw enough money to make up for the loan. I didn't want to foreclose. I had no clue what to do. So we just, we took it in the gut. We rented it out to a professor. An adjunct professor who was teaching at Lehigh University in Bethlehem. And we rented out an apartment ourselves, a 2-bedroom apartment. And the saving grace was that we found a decent apartment for $850 a month. So that we were losing $300 a month on our condo, but at least our housing costs had decreased to a more manageable level.
Yeah.
Until we had our daughter, and I came home from teaching one afternoon when my daughter was 4 months old, and I walk into our 3rd floor apartment, and my wife is on the ground crying her eyes out, and my baby's in the crib crying her eyes out, and I'm like, what is the matter? And my wife goes, I'm pregnant again.
You're like, oh no.
Oh man, this is terrible.
Yeah.
And so we thought we would have to move out of that 2-bedroom apartment, which is bogus. We totally could have survived there. But in my mind, we needed like a 3-bedroom apartment,
Yeah.
And my wife's hours were going to be diminished even more. And we were still losing $300 a month on this condo.
Mm-hmm.
So that was when I thought back to when I was 23 years old and that kid who I'd been with, and I was like, we have to find some setup like that kid had just to survive. You know, it wasn't even about being like a big entrepreneur or something like that. It was like, for us to meet our budget, we need to figure out how to do this.
Yeah. And so this is probably like in 2009, I would assume.
Yeah, my first daughter was born in 2008. And then we were pregnant with my second daughter heading into 2009. And so the things that were in our favor is that we both still had jobs with solid W-2 income, and we could get approved for a mortgage of some amount.
Mm-hmm.
And the other good thing was that prices were depressed in all over, and not just in our condo, which meant there were deals to be had. So to me, here's how I started. I thought back I reread Rich Dad Poor Dad. And I was driving to work, and I pulled up to a stoplight, and I saw a house that had a for sale sign in front of it. And I saw that the house had 2 electric meters
Mm-hmm.
on the side and 2 mailboxes on it. And I was like, I bet that's a duplex. Went to work, and on the way home, I pulled up that corner and wrote down the listing agent's phone number and was like, I'm going to call and see about this. So long story short, I called the agent, we do the showing, and that duplex was awful. It smelled like cigarette smoke and pet dander, and there was like, the tenants were not my style of tenant. I was really depressed, but that agent put me on her automatic email for multifamily listings that came onto the MLS in the Lehigh Valley, which is Bethlehem's MSA.
Uh-huh.
And then 2 months later, my wife's looking at my email, and she says, hey, there's a duplex that we just got emailed that looks really nice. We were still renting. We went to check it out, and it was gorgeous. It was a 3-story row home.
Uh-huh.
In like the historic part of downtown Bethlehem, and the top 2 floors was a really nicely done 3-bedroom apartment, and then the first floor was a 1-bedroom apartment. And so for my family of soon to be 4 people, we could buy the whole thing, live in the top part, and rent out the bottom part, and have that defray the cost of ownership.
Cool. So is that what did you end up buying that property?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll give you the numbers on it. Just again, for people who are just starting out, this is how I looked at it when I was in that boat.
Yeah.
The principal, interest, taxes, and insurance, or the PITI, was going to be about $1,200 a month. And the rent on the first floor was $600 a month. So my calculus was that meant that our kick-in every month would be $600.
Mm-hmm.
And so since we were renting for $850 a month in an apartment, to me, it was like we couldn't afford to not buy that place, because that would be a lower monthly drag on our cash resources.
Yeah.
So the way we did it was we got approved for an FHA mortgage, which is a government program that allows you to put down a 3.5% down payment. And that was all that we were able to afford. That was all the cash we could cobble together. And I even had to borrow a few grand from my in-laws just to get all the closing costs. And so we bought it for, I think, $175,000 in 2009. And this is crazy. I was one of 3 offers, even with a depressed market, because it was a nice place. And when I found out there was multiple offers, I told my real estate agent, I want to offer over 100%. And this was in 2009. And my real estate agent was like, you are crazy. No one in their right mind would offer over 100% for, in this market. And I said, I don't care. I want to do that.
Yeah.
So we ended up getting it. And, my bet is that the other 2 offers were trying to lowball. And, so maybe I overpaid a little bit, but on a 30-year mortgage, it was probably the difference of $8 or $10, because I paid 101% maybe of list price.
Yeah.
way worth it because it changed my financial position by $250 a month right away. So it didn't matter to me that we overpaid for that. It was the deal that we needed at the juncture in life that we needed it. And I would have lost it if I had tried to be a son of a gun
Yeah.
in negotiating, you know?
That's kind of cool that you went from your first property, which was at, a certain mortgage of, what'd you say, like $1,200 a month, or
The condo was
or
1,400.
$1,400 a month, and then you found a rent. Then you rented that out and then went to a rental, an apartment that you guys rented for $800 a month, but you were still paying an extra $300, so you were like at $1,150, so you lowered it a
Right.
little bit, and
Yeah.
then you found this next property, then you lowered your monthly expenses even more down to $600 a month. So it's
Yeah.
like a progressive, you're kind of going up in value by going into a 3-bedroom duplex or apartment that you own, but your monthly expenses are going down and down. So that's cool.
And I got to be honest with you, for somebody like me, that was the mentality of how, at the end of the month, making more money or saving money by getting rid of costs that you don't need. Both of those things give you extra money at the end of the month. So I had no control over my salary. That was dictated by my contract with the school district. I couldn't really bump that up. And with a young family, I wasn't going to deliver pizzas or wait tables or something like that. I really wanted to be with my family. The only control I had to give us more money at the end of the month was to figure out, like you said, that calculus of how do we step down this for every American on average is the highest cost in their budget every month, housing. How do we decrease that so that we have more money at the end of the month? And that was the calculus I was forced into by our situation. Go ahead, sneeze. Nice.
Excuse me. I had a little
You got
sneeze there.
you got
Yeah,
another
no,
one?
that's awesome. And then so your story kind of goes that, fast forward, you end up retiring at a young age. So
Yeah.
how did you kind of go from this one apartment, you guys weren't making that much money. How did you continue to buy properties? I mean, it was a
Yeah.
great market, but you obviously still had to have like money or down payments.
Right.
What happened?
So I'll go there, but I want to say this because there's maybe a few of your listeners who are where I was,
Yeah.
where they have one multifamily or they have two or something. And the process I just described is no less and no more complicated than every step between that point and retiring. So what I tell people that I mentor in investing in real estate is, we have this narrative in our mind, that this idea that one of the steps is going to be something like, you got to bench press 350 pounds, okay? Or you have to reverse dunk a basketball.
Yeah.
And none of the steps in between that first duplex and retiring, none of them were that difficult. I'm not saying it wasn't hard. It was, but each individual step was no more complicated than what I've already described to you. It was just progressive and cumulative, and it compounded.
And you learned from each one
And
along
you
the
learn
way.
from each one, and you also, as you're optimizing your budget, you become in an increasingly better position to take bigger and bigger steps. But they're not bigger steps. It's just you're able to take them now that you have maybe more extra money.
So tell us the story. Isn't this kind of lead to the story of the vacuuming in your truck?
Absolutely, yeah. I could. So real quick, fast forward. We did that, and here's a key piece. A year later, we refinanced out of that FHA loan because FHA loans carry mortgage insurance, and that was an extra like $100-ish on our payment every month. And so a year later, we refinanced. In my PIT, I was $1,100, and we re-rented the apartment for $700. So now we went from our kick-in being $600 a month to our kick-in was now $400 a month to live in, honestly, the nicest apartment I had ever seen. And it's still my flagship apartment that I own in my portfolio. It's a gorgeous place. Exposed brick, open concept, hardwood floors, granite counted. It's awesome.
Yeah, sounds nice.
So really, after that, we rinsed, lathered, and repeated. When I figured out that we could use our occupancy as a way of acquiring real estate, we did that over and over and over again, because really, if you look at that first duplex, I was acquiring an investment asset using owner-occupant financing. So the 3.5% down payment was an incredibly small amount of money, cash out of pocket, to acquire an investment asset.
Mm-hmm.
There's no, from my perspective, there's no better deal out there in any sector of investing where you're able to, with that level of risk, leverage into a powerful, functionally investment asset. So don't discount that. If you're just starting out, see if you can get approved for an FHA loan. It may be better to get a conventional loan if you've got the cash on hand to be able to make the down payment. But there's no way I would have saved up enough money as a teacher to begin buying real estate. I had to use something like the FHA loan, and that was that pierced the veil for me and allowed me to get into the game. So
Yeah.
I'm very grateful for that. Some of that's probably luck. Some of it's our government incentivizing home ownership. Some of it was my in-laws lending me a couple grand just to close the deal. I'm very thankful for all of that, but I wanted to get there, and that's why we did it. Okay, so we did that a couple of times over and over and over again to build up more and more units. We'd move in, fix it up, rent it out, and then move on.
Were they all small multifamily properties,
Yeah,
like duplexes?
exactly. They were all between 1 to 4 units, which is categorically residential real estate in the United States. So you can't, to my knowledge, you can't get an owner-occupant mortgage for commercial real estate, which is 5 units and above.
Mm-hmm.
So you'd have a hard time doing what we did in a higher unit count. And for most people, the best way to get into that real estate investing market is to use your owner occupancy to get in and to make it to work on that scale. So fast forward, I retired in 2015. That was 6 years after that, teary-eyed encounter with my wife and our second child. We had 2 more daughters after that, so I retired with 4 daughters in 2015. At that point, I had 18 units that I was managing. And back to the optimization piece, I was renovating one of my buildings, and I bought a Toyota Tundra truck because I needed it to haul stuff around, or at least I told myself I needed it to haul stuff around. And we get done with the renovation, and I'm still driving this Tundra, which is a V8. It's guzzling gas. I have a loan on it for about $9,500, so I'm paying $300 a month in a car payment. And I'm back to that mindset of how do I optimize our finances, because now I don't even have a salary to back it up. I've quit my job. We're paying for our health insurance, and our income from real estate is funding our lifestyle. So if I'm able to get out from under this truck, I can free up $300 a month that I'm not spending. Plus trucks, man, that was just the loan.
Yeah.
Plus I was burning gas, registration costs more, insurance costs more, tires cost more.
Everything.
Trucks are expensive, especially when you drive them around empty all the time.
Yeah.
Which is most Americans.
Uh-huh.
The number one selling domestic vehicle in the United States is a Ford F-150. And I've seen them on the road, and most of them are empty.
Empty. Yep, I know.
They're empty. The only thing they're carrying is people's ego.
I have a truck too, but what I just did is actually I sold a bigger truck. I had a big diesel truck, but I was towing and doing construction work and like towing tractors and stuff. But I got all done with that, and I was like, why am I doing this? It's
right.
Like tires are expensive. Oil change is freaking 12 quarts of oil, and like the diesel's more expensive. So I sold it, and I got like a half ton, like a small truck, because I still use it for my kids' toys and dirt bikes and all that sort of thing. But I get it, man. Sure. It's like, why do I have this expensive thing? Back in when I was 18 or 22, I had big lifted trucks and all this stuff. And I never did anything with them. I just had them just because it's cool. But
those tires have never seen mud.
Yeah.
Right. But you're
look good though. But
right.
Unfunctional.
Exactly. So, that's part of it is it doesn't make sense to be wasteful like that. That's not a good economic equation. It was a 5,000-pound vehicle carrying around a 200-pound man. There are more efficient machines to do that.
Mm-hmm.
But if you buy into the mass marketing, you think I have to do this to be a man or to be an American or something like that. And I got to tell you, you're lining Saudi pockets if you're driving around a truck and burning a bunch of gas.
Yeah.
So don't fool yourself into fake patriotism
Yeah.
because you're driving a truck. So I digress, though. I needed to get out from under the truck payment. And the problem was, and I had sold cars before, like cars that I had owned, but I had only sold cars to where I owned it outright and I had the title. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And this truck in Pennsylvania, I'm actually not sure how it works in other states, but in Pennsylvania, you don't get the title while you still have an outstanding loan on an automobile. The state holds it until the bank releases the lien on the vehicle. And then once you make your last payment, they'll send you a clear title. So I didn't know how to sell this truck because I didn't have the title. I would not be able to get the title unless I paid off the loan. And I would not be able to pay off the loan unless I sold the truck.
Yeah.
So I was in like a catch-22 that froze me for a while and was like pegging me to this monthly payment and these high costs of ownership. And finally one day I'm like, you know what? I don't know how to sell this truck with a loan on it. I don't know how to do that. But I do know how to vacuum out my truck. It was dirty because, whatever, I'm a slob.
Yeah.
And I was like, and that's free to do. So I'm going to go outside and vacuum my truck. So the next, I took my shop vac out. I vacuumed the truck out, took the Windex, did all the, dashboard and everything. And then the next day I told myself, I don't know how to sell this truck, but I know how to wash it. So I took it to the car wash and I washed it. Then the next day I'm like, I still don't know how to sell a truck that has a loan on it, but I know how. My wife is good at taking pictures and that's still free. So I'm going to do that. So my wife took pictures of the truck, from all the right angles for like ads.
Mm-hmm.
And then the next day I'm like, I still have no clue how to sell this truck, but I know how to make a Craigslist ad. And at the time that's how people were buying cars. I guess they still do.
Heck yeah.
And that was still free. So it was small, risk-free steps that I was willing to take, even though I didn't know where it was going to lead. And so long story short, people start calling on the ad. I think I had it on for $11,000. I'm still like, I don't know what I'm going to do if they want to buy it.
Yeah.
But it was free to give people test drives. So I did that, and after like 2 weeks, an older guy came. We test drove it. He drove it on the highway. He's like, all right, I want to buy it from you. He had a newer Tundra. He's like, my son needs a truck. Well, I want to buy this one for him. I've loved my Tundra. So that's when I tell him, I'm like, I'm happy to sell it to you. Just so you know, like, I have a loan on it, and the only way I can pay off the loan is if you give me the money, and then we can just go and transact after I get the title. And the guy's like, I am not going to do that, which was the right answer. You shouldn't do that.
Yeah.
Because you should have the title in hand when you transact on an automobile like that. He said, but what I will do is this. I'll give you $500 right now to hold the truck as a deposit. We'll sign an option agreement, just and he said, and then go find the rest of the money to pay it off somewhere else. My money guarantees you that I won't go buy another truck, and if I do, I'm out $500. And it guarantees me that you're not going to go sell it to somebody else. So go find the money. And he's like, then when you get the title, call me and we'll go and complete the transaction. So I hadn't thought of that. It was probably a good thing that the person who wanted to buy it was like an older guy who had, had years of experience.
Mm-hmm.
So I went and I said I didn't have the money for it. I self-escrow my real estate taxes and my own insurance payments for the properties that we had. So I had maybe like $6 or $7 grand socked away to pay those bills, but I never was comfortable treating that as cash on hand. That's escrow money.
Yeah.
And then I had, maybe a couple grand in the bank, and I had his $500 that he had just given me. So I cleared it all out. I sent in one check to pay off the loan to the bank. My wife and I, for like a week and a half, put everything on credit cards, groceries or whatever.
And you're nervous, hoping the guy's going to come through.
Yeah,
and
I was like, what if it falls apart? But I realized, like, if it falls apart, then I already have a paid off truck, and the next person who wants to buy it, I won't have to, do any of this.
Yeah.
I already have the title in hand. So I got it. We went, we transacted. I paid off he bought it. I paid it off, and I put all the proceeds from the sale, I put it all back into the escrow accounts. And then I had the extra, I don't know, $1.5 grand, $2,000 or whatever, the difference between the sales price and my loan. And I bought a used beater hatchback.
Yeah.
Which was good enough to carry around a ladder and, a vacuum cleaner and all the stuff that I use to manage my properties anyhow. So I look back on that story and I realized, like, it started with me deciding I'm going to get off my butt and I'm going to go vacuum my truck, even though I don't know where this is all headed. And that has become a mantra for me in my approach to real estate. I look back before that was kind of the approach I took with investing in real estate to begin with, but it's also been my mantra since then of, like, I don't know how this works. I'm kind of intimidated. I'm in over my head, but I'm just going to take the next step that I can see right now. And then I'll hope that the spotlight shines on the next step when I get to that next one. So I'll give you some examples. In the last 2 years, I've done a couple 1031 exchange deals, which, for your listeners, if they don't know what that is, that's a way to sell and acquire real estate without paying any capital gains taxes. When I first started, that was a totally exotic idea to me. We're very intimidated by it. I just thought that's for the big boys.
Yeah.
And my approach to it was very similar to vacuuming the truck. I just found a little answer. I called different people. I got this answer here. I filled out this document. I sent this stuff. I got a buyer. And it really was, and I'm not kidding you, every step was as easy as vacuuming my truck. In fact, vacuuming my truck took me like 2 hours. So maybe that was even harder than filling out paperwork, and doing a Google search on 1031 exchange companies. So right now I'm in the closing stages of a gigantic cross-collateralized multi-million-dollar refinance on a number of my properties. And I never in my wildest dreams, when my baby and wife were crying on the middle of the floor, would have thought that I've gotten to a point where I would be doing, multi-million-dollar refinances on a portfolio of 36 rental units in Bethlehem. But here I am, and every step along the way has just been as easy as it has not been easy. It's been very hard, but it's been as simple as vacuuming my truck and saying, I'm going to figure out the next step.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And I think one thing we forget when we're little, we always ask lots of questions, right? Like when you're a kid, like my little girls I have, they come home I come home and they just ask me all these questions. It's like ridiculous questions. You know what I mean? They're just like nonsense, but they don't know. So they're just asking me about, why is this blue? Why does that milk taste like that? Why is this or that? And then as we get older, we kind of forget to keep asking questions. I don't know if it's like an ego thing or like we're afraid to get the wrong answer or afraid to be wrong or whatever. But I think what you're saying is take each step at a time and then just go find out one answer. Like, okay,
exactly.
1031, what is it? Let me look it up. Okay, who does it? Let me look that up. Who can help me? Let me look that up. Just keep asking the questions, right?
Well, and you know what? Another lesson in there. So I like to work in idioms, right? So like if your listeners want to remember, you're sitting at your computer, you want to know how to succeed, you vacuum the truck. That should be your daily mantra. How do I vacuum the truck today and push the football 3 yards farther down the field today and figure that out. But the other idiom that I often use is that answers are better than guesses. Okay, so when you're looking at what you want in the future, a lot of people, they'll write it off because they're guessing at what it would take. I've learned, get the answers. Most of the time, the answers are free or cheap. Go get the answers and then make a decision. That way you're operating from a position of answers and not from a position of guesses. I still catch myself operating out of guesswork, and I have to correct myself and say, Bryce, you don't know that. Go ask the person who does know it and then decide. You're trying to decide before you know. Go find out and then decide. Otherwise, you're just shooting yourself in the foot. And and be humble too. So this multi-million-dollar refinance that I'm pursuing, the loan brokers that I used, my initial instinct with them is I want them to be impressed with my business abilities.
Mm-hmm.
I want them to be impressed with my business acumen. I want them to think I'm a big shot businessman because then they'll give me this loan. Okay. And I got to tell you, that is actually destructive to getting deals done. I've learned, this is literally what I said to them. We talked for a little bit. I'm not a complete idiot, so we're speaking the same language.
Uh-huh.
But I said things to them like, hey, just so you know, I'm kind of dumb, and I'm probably going to make you repeat this after we say it. And actually, you should make me repeat it so that I can confirm I'm understanding what you're saying. And what did? They laughed, and they kept talking to me.
Yeah.
All right? And I'll say, like, okay, look, I even said to them, this is intimidating for me. I've never done a loan this big, and there's a lot of moving pieces that I'm sure I'm not seeing. I'm going to need your help if we're going to do this, to point that out to me so I can, I'll do whatever it takes to rectify it. I'll be transparent with you guys, and I'll be honest. I'm not trying to hide anything, but this is the first time I've leveled up like this, and I'm going to need some help and some coaching and some guidance in it. Boy, you put that on somebody's plate, they're going to respond in kind, and they're going to be transparent with you. They're not going to withhold information from you, and they're going to want to help you because you're not trying to impress them. You're asking for help. I always, always, always ask for help. I ask for help at the customer service desk at Lowe's, and I tell them, hey, I'm kind of an idiot. I'm going to really need some help here.
Yeah.
I ask for help from my tenants. I say, hey, guaranteed there's going to be problems in your apartment. There's always at least one problem in your year tenancy. Let me know and help me fix it. You're kind of my proxy property manager here, and I'll do my best to not kick the can down the road, and we'll solve this problem together.
Yeah.
Boy, tenants respond really well when that's the script, and their landlord's not trying to be like, hey, just so you know, I'm the boss around here. It's
Right.
like, screw that guy. He's a
Yeah.
jerk.
No, that's perfect information, because I kind of do the same thing a lot of times when I talk to people. And what it is trying to be personable. You know what I mean? Like,
Right.
like for this podcast, for example, I've never done a podcast before, and it's progressively getting better. And sometimes I mess up on my words, and sometimes, it doesn't always go smoothly. But as long as I kind of keep talking and be personable with the guests, they understand. Like sometimes I mess the emails up or whatever, same kind of thing. They're like, oh, no problem, and we'll help each other through the situation, because we're just trying to make it. We're all trying to get to the same place, so I definitely understand what you're saying.
Yeah. And, it's risky. You could be embarrassed.
Mm-hmm.
There could be somebody who you finish interviewing with them, and they say to you, hey, just so you know, that was really unprofessional. And I don't like where that went. And I won't be, a repeat guest on your podcast. And anyone who asks me, I'm going to tell them not to do it or something like that.
Yeah.
Well, okay, so that's risky, but that's actually really good information for you, that there are people out there who might want something about your approach to be different. Now, I'm not saying that. I don't care.
Yeah.
But maybe somebody does. And but I don't know. In the end, friendly equals professional.
Mm-hmm.
And there's very few differences between the two, or consideration equals professionalism. So if you're friendly and considerate, people will, a lot of times, I think, give you forbearance on some of the finer points of etiquette. And they may even coach you.
Yeah.
And say, hey, dude, next time, jacket and tie.
Yeah.
Now, I've never done a podcast with somebody wearing a jacket and a tie.
Yeah.
But like, if you're going to meet a banker who's giving you millions of dollars, it might be time to put on your best outfit.
Yeah. No, for sure. No, that's all great advice. And one quick thing I have before we move to like where you're at right now is, how did you make the leap from, like a mental leap to leave your job and become a full-time investor? Because that's kind of an issue a lot of people have too, right? Is that they get to a spot and they're afraid to leave that security of their job. So why did you leave it, and how did you leave it?
So I left it slowly. That's the first thing I want to say. By the year that I retired, or the year before I retired, I did two things. One, I made more money in absolute terms in real estate than from my day job. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So it wasn't, I'll quit my job and see what happens. All right.
Yeah.
It was, I will keep my job and I will work really hard with my, side hustle or my extra hours or whatever. And then we'll see where this goes. So to give you an example, after that first duplex, we bought a triplex that we lived in, and the apartment, the unit that we moved to was smaller than what we were moving out of. So I was willing to move my family into a smaller apartment, and we had 3 kids at that point, into a smaller apartment with 2 apartments above it. And every day I was going to work at 6 o'clock, grading papers, planning my lessons. I was coaching. I came home around 4:30. We did dinner with our girls. We got them to bed by about 8 o'clock. And then from 8 until 1 in the morning, I was going up and either doing demo or putting in fixtures or painting or doing cleaning up, whatever, in these other apartments for a year. And then I'd wake up at 6 o'clock and do it all over again. Okay, so this was not a sort of snowflake, fleeting, I'll trifle with this. This was, in my mind, I was like, I am Vito Corleone in 1905. I just stepped off the boat in New York City. I don't have a friend in the world, and it's go time. All right?
Yeah.
And we lived like, circa 1905 New York immigrants. And I'm kidding. We lived well, but like it was hard. It was difficult, and I really pushed it for that time when we lived in it because I knew that was going to eventually. I broke up a little bit there. Are you hearing
No,
me?
you're good.
Okay. I knew that would eventually purchase my freedom from my day job. So I was still working my job. I knew I didn't want to be in it for 35 years. And I was working myself out of that. And I said, when we get to a healthy buffer over our current budget in passive real estate income, then I can look at leaving my job and giving full time to real estate, but not before. That would have been unwise. And so in retrospect, my job was a blessing. It really was. We had good health insurance while we had our 4 daughters. A teacher's health insurance typically is pretty good. I had all 4 of my daughters were cesarean section births, and I saw the bill that was covered by my insurance company.
Yeah.
And it averaged $30,000 per child.
It's crazy.
So that's $120,000, and all we paid was, I think, the copay on the first OBGYN visit for each child.
Yeah.
So it would have been dumb for me to leave my job before we were done having kids.
Mm-hmm.
That would have been dumb. So I say that to warn any starry-eyed dreamers out there from, jumping first and building the parachute on the way down. You gotta plan and take risks while you're still doing your day job and making money. You don't get to pursue your passion until you pay your bills. And so I had to keep paying my bills with it. But then ultimately, it was that calculus. And then the year that I made more money in real estate than in teaching, I was doing my own taxes, and I saw the difference between what I paid in taxes on my W-2 income and what I paid in taxes on my real estate income. And I was just flabbergasted.
There's a huge difference.
Yeah, absolutely. My real estate income was taxed so much more advantageously than my work income. I would say even the comparison would be every $10,000 of salary is equivalent to about $6,000 of real estate income. So if you're making $60,000 purely from real estate rental income, that's like having a $100,000 job. Okay, that's about the equivalency factor. So most people don't think of that. They're just comparing the absolute numbers. But because of depreciation, because of all the deductions that you're allowed to take, because of appreciation of your underlying assets, because of the typical growth trend of rents, having a real estate income is far superior to having wage income or salaried income. So that became clear to me as well. And I realized, it'll only take maybe another property or two to make up for the salary that I'm quitting, at the end of the year or at the end of the day. In terms of cash in my hand, two more properties that would take me about 10 hours a month tops to manage would make up for 160 hours a month, maybe 200 hours a month of working a job.
Yeah.
So when I realized that, I was like, okay, there's no comparison here. I would rather work 10 hours a month on two more small multifamilies than, 50 hours a week as a teacher.
Yeah, no, for sure. So at that point you had like about 20 units, right? Or 18?
Yeah, thereabouts. I think I quit with 16 units. Now I had relentlessly pursued the maximization of profits in the units I had up to that point.
Mm-hmm.
For most people, 16 units is not enough to retire on.
Mm-hmm.
It needs to be more than that. But I was dogged in my pursuit of it. And the other good thing was my interest rates. I'll say this because some of your listeners might not know that. When we moved out of that first duplex and went to our next place, we were not obliged to refinance as investors and get an investment mortgage on that first duplex. We kept the 30-year fixed owner-occupant financing on that first duplex. The bank didn't make us refinance it. And in general, banks don't make you do that. And what that meant was that cash flowed a lot better because it's on a 30-year amortization. It was at like 3.25% interest rate. When you buy and you're buying initially an investment property and you're buying as an investment property, most banks are going to push you into like a 20-year, maybe 25-year amortization. And you're going to be, generally speaking, about a point higher in interest rate. So that kills cash flow. I had built through owner occupancy a machine that really was a high cash flow machine. And that was in many ways why we were to retire too, because we had a lot of cash flow coming out of those units every month.
Yeah. No, that
I
makes
mean,
sense.
I realize that now in retrospect.
Yeah.
In immediacy, it was just trying to survive. But looking back, I was like, that's actually a pretty good strategy for good cash flow.
Yeah.
Yeah,
no, definitely. No, that's awesome. So now you're at, how many units are you at now?
Today?
Yeah, today.
36 units. Market value is, I don't know, maybe 3.5 to 4 million. They're all my units are within a quarter mile of each other. In fact, 32 of them are basically on the same block.
Oh, wow.
That's been part of my strategy too, is that I have wanted to pursue a low overhead costs. And I just don't want to drive around all the time, especially not in the Toyota Tundra or in anything else for that matter. So having 32 units that last year I hired a maintenance guy who lives in one of the units, and he can walk to all of the other units for when tenants get locked out. He can, shovel sidewalks. Takes him about a cigarette and a half to shovel all the sidewalks. He can mow the little bits of lawn that I do have, and he can do general kind of handyman stuff. And it means I don't need a full-time property manager who would eat about 8 to 10% of gross rents. I just have a quid pro quo arrangement with him for a rent subsidy. I don't charge him a whole lot of rent because he's there. And for him, he has a day job. He just does that stuff at night when he comes back. And so it's a good setup. And it has meant that it's way easier to manage those geographically condensed units. It also, by the way, is the reason that the bank I'm talking to is willing to give me a cross-collateralized loan. Generally speaking, banks don't want to do that, especially with the kind of properties that I have. A lot of them are residential properties, categorically residential. But I went to a bank and said, look, I have properties that are all right here. It's one discrete portfolio, and I'm looking for a refinance for all of them under one note. And the bank was willing to do that because they're so close together.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Why are you getting that big refinance loan? What's your next plans? Like where are you going next? Buying a bigger units or what?
So are you familiar with the Burr method?
Yeah, of course.
Some bigger pockets.
Yeah.
I've had some deferred Burr equity, I would say, in a lot of these properties
Mm-hmm.
that I just have not tapped back out. And so some of it, this refinance reduces my monthly finance costs. So a few of my mortgages are at higher rates because they were not owner occupant mortgages, and a few of them are on 20-year amortizations.
Mm-hmm.
And this bank is giving me 30-year amortization and a decent rate on my money, or for these properties, and I'm getting cash out. So I'm pulling out, I don't know, a couple $100,000 in cash, and simultaneously decreasing my monthly finance charges. To me, that's a win-win scenario. Because I don't know where this market's headed. It could be headed for a correction where I have to maybe lower rents to keep occupancy high. And that's somewhere where I want to have good liquidity.
Yeah.
Both in terms of monthly cash flow. And it could mean if there's a correction that there's some deals coming up. And if I have dry powder in the form of a few $100,000 in cash, it means I'll be able to snatch up deals in cash. So I don't have any target acquisition with the money. I just know I want to be ready. And to me, vacuuming the truck for whatever the market holds in the next, 2 to 5 years meant setting up this refinance and getting everything lined up. So it's been a bear because the bank wants a heck of a lot more paperwork than I've ever done for any refinance.
Yeah.
And I haven't closed it yet. So, no celebrating yet. I don't get to spike the ball until I'm in the end zone.
Yeah.
But if it goes through, it'll achieve a number of ends for me. It'll decrease my finance costs by about $2,000 a month. It'll give me some money for some renovations I need to do in a few of my units that are not up to my standards. And it'll put some money in my pocket for whatever the next acquisition is. Or I'll throw this out there too. I've thought about using the extra money to. Are you still with me?
I am. Sorry. Yep. Yeah.
I thought about using the extra money to pay down my house, my own residence. And instead of having a fixed mortgage on my house to establish a line of credit on my house, that way I'm not paying the ongoing interest for my house because the line of credit is there but not exercised. Mm-hmm. But I don't lose the ability to pull it out if I see a deal, and I don't lose that liquidity. So with that extra money, I can also reduce my overall monthly charges by another maybe $1,200, $1,300 by paying down my mortgage and just paying whatever the outstanding interest is on whatever I do with that HELOC.
Yeah, there's tons of options.
Yeah, that's a scalability that's desirable for me to go in and go out. And right now, maybe I don't need to have $100,000, $200,000, $300,000 sitting around in the bank. Maybe it's better to have it sitting in my house. As long as I can tap it when I need it, I'm not paying for that extra debt until I need to go ahead and exercise it.
No, yeah, that's awesome. That's good planning because we don't know what's going to happen. So, I have tons of more questions that I could ask, but what we could do is in a year from now or 2 years from now, we can circle back and love to find out what you end up doing with that money. But in the interest of time, just because it is getting a little long in the tooth here, let's move to the next section real quick that says, like, what is your favorite resource to learn about real estate? Like you like the vacuum the truck analogy.
Yeah.
Where do you like to learn about the next stage of your real estate investing career?
Well, if I look backwards, my favorite way to learn about real estate is to make mistakes. Yeah. At least that's the most common way I've learned about real estate. Mm-hmm. So for guys like I started, the best way to learn about real estate is to walk real estate, mm-hmm. and then to crunch the numbers and figure out, is this going to pay out every month? Do your PITI calculations. Just do it. If it's going to make money, and you have a reasonable expectation that you're going to have tenants, the way you learn to manage that property is to own that property and to make money on it.
Yeah.
There is no book out there on a specific property. Nobody else has managed it except for the previous owner. He's your best resource probably, or maybe the tenants who have been there for a while. So don't think that you need that book before you go do that. The deal will tell you. But take the calculus that I took into it. How do I make sure I get the right income? And I have a market which is a growing market. We have high population density. There's high demand. So I know my market well enough to know what I can rent the places out for.
Right.
So if it was somebody else just starting, it would be a guy like me to say, like, if you make these apartments nice, you can rent them all for $1,000 each. Find somebody who's doing it. Another thing that I did was I joined a mentoring group about 2 years ago with guys who are deca millionaires and above, and who are doing big deals like syndication deals and some of the larger multifamily stuff.
Yeah.
Again, in my mind, this is exotic. This swimming pool is too deep for me. This sandbox is too big for me. And my impression with dealing with a lot of those guys is they're no smarter than I am. They've just done some of these bigger steps and grown, or they're just later in the game than I am, you know?
Yeah.
And, but the tutoring group or that mentoring group was actually the first thing they did when I got into the group was tell me that I needed to hire the maintenance guy.
Right.
Because I was doing everything myself, and they're like, dude, if you like mowing lawns, great, keep doing it. But if you'd like to scale up, you should devote your brain to higher dollar productive hour activities and start to delegate out that other stuff.
Yeah.
That was a big lesson for me because I wanted to
hold on to it.
Yeah.
For sure. Well, no, that's all awesome information.
I'll give a plug.
Yeah.
You should look at this yourself. The group is called M1.
Okay.
It's the child group of a mentoring group called GoBundance.
Yeah.
They're a great resource for everything from personal finance to personal growth to real estate investing.
Mm-hmm.
And it's been a good growth trajectory for me to be involved in that group.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think I've mentioned GoBundance and M1 on here before, and I've actually, talked to some people about GoBundance. So, yeah, it's definitely a good group, and that's a huge key is get around people.
Let me give a plug.
Go ahead.
Right, get around people who are doing stuff. I'll tell you this: it's not cheap. Okay.
Yeah.
I think I spent $7,000 to join the program, and I was like, "That's crazy! I could renovate a bathroom for $7,000 and get a tangible return." But I learned lessons in there that in the last year and a half, I've made, I'm going to say $500,000, maybe $600,000 from connections, lessons, or just mentality stuff from that group. So yeah, I spent $7,000, but the ROI has been through the roof.
Yeah.
Being involved in it, it's just been out of this world.
I definitely agree. No, that's awesome. Well, cool. Well, Bryce, I appreciate all the information. Hopefully people can learn a lot and they learn some good mindset tips throughout the way. Where can people find out more about you and what you're doing and just the future of Bryce?
Okay. So I'm doing my own podcast.
Yeah.
We're recording episodes, editing, trying to figure out if we sound stupid or not. But the podcast is called Vacuum the Truck because that's my mantra.
Uh-huh.
And the pretext of it is it's me and a 21-year-old kid who I'm mentoring, and my goal is to make him a millionaire. And instead of going to different experts who have already succeeded, which, by the way, sometimes that can feel a lot like going through Facebook and seeing everybody's best version of themselves. Sometimes it feels like that if you listen to like real estate podcasts or whatever. You're like, okay, great, another person who's succeeding and knocking it out of the park. Awesome. That's not me.
Yeah.
Another person who's out to eat on Facebook. Great. That's not me. I want a kid who the stuff we're talking about is like, dude, you need to ask your employer for a raise and you need a side hustle. I don't care if it's Uber or delivering pizzas. And here's how we're going to figure out how to negotiate your living circumstances so you can make more money. Because that's where most people are at.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, a lot of the coaching. So our podcast is me yelling at him and telling him, he's not a snowflake, he's not special, but he has potential, and that he needs to start taking some of the right steps. And he's a really smart kid, but he desires more. So Vacuum the Truck podcast, and then I wrote a book which gives a little more detail for my story, some of the granular stuff, called Millionaires Vacuum Their Trucks, which it's my story, and it reinforces a lot of the lessons I've learned from other millionaires who really have said the same thing that I've said, which is I didn't do anything genius. I just kept doing little things that got me where I'm at.
Perfect. All right. Well, you can find out more about Bryce's story and everything in the show notes. He's been on other podcasts on Bigger Pockets. Go check out his podcast, Vacuum the Truck, and look for his book, Millionaires Vacuum Their Trucks, coming out shortly, right?
Yeah.
Cool. Well, Bryce, thanks again. Thanks for being here. There's tons of information. Hopefully somebody learns and takes their next step in their career from this. And you have a good afternoon. Thanks, Bryce.
Thanks so much.
Thanks.